Welcome back to True Echo, where the most powerful stories aren't fiction, they're reminders. Stories of redemption, justice, and soul-shaking truth. Today, what begins as a case of mistaken identity turns into one of the most emotional moments ever witnessed on a piano bench. A janitor no one looked at twice. A student they underestimated. And one haunting duet that brought an entire hall to tears. Stay with us. You're not going to believe what happens next. The mop bucket squeaked as it rolled across the marbled floor of the Albrecht Conservatory, a sound far too humble for a place that dripped with elegance and entitlement. The boy who passed it, tall, pale, polished like a museum exhibit, sneered as if the janitor's mere existence scuffed his reputation. "Watch it, janitor," he muttered without breaking stride. "This isn't your stage." The man pushing the mop paused only for a breath, the kind that said, "I've heard worse." He didn't flinch, didn't defend himself. Just returned to his work with a quiet precision, his hands red from bleach, his step steady and patient. No one knew that this man, dressed in oversized coveralls, had once walked red carpets. Or that the fingers now scrubbing floors had once performed for royalty. His name was Eli. That's what the name tag said. Mid-50s, streaks of silver in his tight curls, and a face both kind and unreadable. Most days he barely spoke. Just cleaned. Always early, always invisible. The students of Albrecht never questioned his presence. He blended into the wallpaper of their ambition, a background figure in their quest for perfection. They never asked how he got there, or why he seemed to linger near the practice rooms just a little longer than necessary. One afternoon, Eli paused outside room 204. A girl was playing Chopin, each note textbook perfect, yet lifeless, like a machine mimicking feeling. She played with the restraint of someone afraid of being wrong. When she noticed the figure outside, her fingers faltered and she slammed the lid shut. Their eyes met, hers wide with suspicion, his calm and unreadable. She didn't know that he wasn't judging her. Quite the opposite. He heard what she was trying to say. She just hadn't found the right voice yet. Later, deep in the conservatory's forgotten basement, Eli dusted off an old upright piano. Its finish was cracked, a few keys stuck, and it smelled faintly of mildew and rosewood. He sat before it like one might sit across from an old friend they hadn't spoken to in years. Then he began to play. The piece wasn't loud or complex. It didn't sound like performance. It sounded like memory, soft, broken, and personal. No one knew this melody because he hadn't written it for anyone else. It was the room she left behind. A confession in musical form. The notes floated up the stairwell, unnoticed by the hurried students and stressed faculty, except for one. Lena Thomas, the same girl from room 204, stopped in her tracks. She'd never heard music like that in these halls, vulnerable, aching, human. It wasn't structured. It was searching. She followed the sound, her sneakers quiet on the stone steps, heart racing with an urgency she didn't understand. But by the time she reached the room, the piano had fallen silent. No one was there. Just dust, old chairs, and a piano that seemed too alive to have been played by ghosts. She didn't say a word. Not to her classmates. Not even to her professor. But the next morning, when she passed Eli in the corridor, she slowed. For the first time, she looked at him, really looked. "Do you play?" she asked. Eli didn't stop mopping. "Used to," he said. "Was that, you? In the basement?" He didn't answer. Just nodded toward her music sheets. "You didn't play it wrong," he murmured. "You just didn't let it breathe." Then he pushed his mop onward, leaving her standing there, frozen. That night, Lena returned to the basement. Not because she was assigned to. Not because she was expected to. But because the music hadn't left her. It lingered in her chest like something unfinished, echoing behind her ribs in a language only her heart could understand. The door creaked as she opened it. Eli was already there, seated at the battered upright piano, head bowed as though in prayer. He didn't flinch when she entered. Just shifted slightly to make room on the bench. "You weren't supposed to hear that," he said. "I wasn't supposed to hear most things in this place," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I did. And I came back." He patted the bench beside him. She sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was waiting. "Try your piece," he said. Lena hesitated. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling. Then she played, tentatively, like someone walking barefoot across broken glass. Her notes came in fits and starts, unsure and self-conscious. A few bars in, she faltered completely. "I'm sorry," she muttered. "Don't be," Eli said, placing a gentle finger on one of the notes she missed. "Here. Let it linger. Don't rush to the next thing. Let the silence carry it." Together, they worked through the melody, not by instruction, but by memory. Eli didn't teach her where to put her fingers. He told her where to put her feelings. "This part," he said softly, tapping a chord, "should feel like you're waiting for someone who promised they'd come back." "And this?" she asked, playing a melancholy phrase. "That's the apology you never gave." By the time they reached the end, Lena sat breathless, eyes wet. The piano lid closed with a soft thud, like a secret returning to its box. "I don't want to get you in trouble," she whispered. "You won't," he said. "But why are you helping me?" Eli's eyes softened. "Because someone helped me once. And because you haven't been taught to trust your own sound." Then, without another word, he stood and disappeared behind a stack of chairs, vanishing into the quiet like smoke. The next morning, word began to spread, quietly, like rumor smoke curling under closed doors. A janitor had been seen at the piano. A student claimed she overheard him humming Rachmaninoff with perfect pitch. Another swore he was sketching sheet music on the back of a cleaning schedule. Lena kept her silence. But her hands itched for the keys now, not to impress, but to confess. And that was new. In Professor Langston's workshop that afternoon, Lena brought a new piece, her own. Langston raised an eyebrow. "You've written something original?" She nodded. He folded his arms, skeptical. "You're not ready." But she sat anyway. And she played. The notes weren't perfect. But they were real. The melody twisted and trembled, like something trying to remember what it once was. When the last note faded, the class sat stunned. Langston didn't applaud. He didn't speak. He merely stared. "Where did you learn that voicing?" he demanded. Lena met his gaze. "I heard it." "From whom?" She paused. "Someone who listens better than you teach." Gasps rippled. Langston's face flushed. "That janitor's been filling your head with nonsense." "No," Lena said. "He's helping me find what was already there." Langston slammed the score shut. "This is unacceptable. He is not faculty. He is not even." But Lena was already gathering her papers. She walked out, spine straight, footsteps quiet. And half the class followed her. That night, Eli sat at the old upright, running his fingers along the keys, waiting, not for praise, but for presence. He wasn't sure if she'd come back. Then the door opened. Lena. And behind her, 4 others. They didn't speak. Just entered, each carrying sheet music, each with something different in their eyes. Not defiance. Hope. "Are we in the right place?" one boy asked. "You are," Lena replied, placing her sheet down, "if you came to hear the music, not just the noise." Eli said nothing. Just looked at them each in turn. Then he pointed to a girl with a violin. "Play something," he said. "Anything you've never dared show anyone." She hesitated. then lifted the instrument and began. The first notes were rough. But Eli didn't flinch. She kept playing, and slowly, something beautiful emerged, not perfect, but hers. When she finished, she whispered, "Was that okay?" "It was honest," Eli said. "That's better." They all took turns. Pieces half finished. Melodies they were too afraid to share in daylight. Improvised jazz runs, forgotten lullabies. By the time the session ended, it wasn't a lesson. It was a reckoning. They didn't just find their voices. They remembered them. Upstairs, Professor Langston was fuming. He paced the faculty lounge like a caged animal. "He's poisoning them," he muttered. "They're questioning everything." Dr. Fenwick, the aging violin master, peered over his newspaper. "Or maybe," he said dryly, "they're just finally hearing the truth." Langston turned. "He's a janitor. Or maybe he's something more, and you just missed it." Langston's eyes narrowed. "I'll see to it he's removed." But change had already begun. Not loud. But irreversible. And in the quiet, dusty basement of the Albrecht Conservatory, a revolution was taking shape. Not with protests. With music. The following morning, the east wing of the conservatory carried an unusual buzz, not from the hum of cello strings or the chatter of students, but from a new kind of energy. Whispers floated through the corridors like breeze under a closed door. Someone had played an unlisted piece in recital workshop. Half the class had walked out with her. And the janitor, yes, the janitor, had been seen again with sheet music tucked into the folds of his coat. Lena arrived early. Not because she had to, but because something inside her felt urgent. As she walked past the memorialized portraits of donors and dead composers, she clutched a folder to her chest. Inside, a clean manuscript, a title scribbled in pencil. Inheritance. It wasn't a sonata. It wasn't a fugue. It was a question. A bridge between what she'd been taught and what she knew was true. Downstairs, in the basement room now known quietly among the students as the listening lab, Eli was already seated at the upright, the same piano he'd played in anonymity for months. This time, he didn't flinch when she entered. He looked up, nodded. "You came." "So did they," Lena said. Behind her, 6 more students filtered into the space, some hesitant, some defiant, all changed. They didn't sit in rows. They gathered in a half-circle, instruments slung over shoulders, sheet music in hand, journals under arm. Eli didn't raise his voice. He didn't call it a class. He just motioned to a violinist who had always sat in the back during Langston's lectures. "Play something," he said. "But this time, don't show us how good you are. Show us what you're afraid of." The student blinked. Then lifted his bow. What emerged was a trembling piece that cracked in the middle, like a voice breaking during confession. When he finished, no one clapped. No one needed to. There was something sacred in the silence that followed. One by one, they played. Not for perfection. For truth. Eli listened to every note. He didn't interrupt. He asked questions, not about technique, but about memory. Where were you when you heard this sound for the first time? Who were you before this melody came to you? Where in this piece are you hiding? The students began to answer, not with words, but with music. They wept, laughed, stumbled, recovered. What had once been a dusty basement was now a sanctum. At the end of the session, Lena stayed behind. "Did you really stop playing because of them?" she asked. Eli looked at her, the candlelight from the desk reflecting in his eyes. "I stopped playing," he said, "because I couldn't hear myself anymore. It wasn't music. It was noise." Applause got louder than the notes. She sat beside him again, brushing her fingers across the battered keys. "But you're playing again." He nodded slowly. "Because of you." Word spread fast, faster than Eli wanted. Students began skipping sanctioned studio hours to gather in the basement. Some professors were indifferent, others quietly intrigued. But Langston? Langston was livid. These sessions, he barked during a faculty meeting, they're dismantling everything this conservatory stands for. What if they're redefining it? Dr. Fenwick said quietly, not looking up from his notes. Langston turned on him. You think this is healthy? A man with no credentials turning our best students into rebels? I think, Fenwick replied, setting his pen down, that for the first time in years, they're not just playing. They're feeling. That evening, Lena returned to her dorm to find a notice slid under her door, required meeting, Professor Langston, 9 a.m. sharp. She didn't sleep. The next morning, Langston didn't waste time. You've embarrassed this institution, he began. Your recital defied protocol. You've defied my authority. Lena stood still. I played what I believed in. You played what he fed you. No, she said. I played what I remembered. What I'd forgotten I had. He slapped a folder on the table. Do you think the board cares about your feelings? You were accepted here to be shaped. Not to shape. Lena stepped forward, voice steady. If this school can't handle the truth inside a song, maybe it's the one that needs reshaping. Langston pointed at the door. You're suspended from recital rotation until further notice. Lena blinked. Not in fear, but in clarity. Then she turned and walked out. That night, Eli sat alone at the piano again. His fingers hovered, uncertain. He hadn't heard from Lena since the meeting. The rumors of her punishment spread like wildfire. He wondered if he'd pushed too far. Given too much. Then the door opened. She stood there, face unreadable. Did you lose your stage again? He asked gently. No, she said, stepping forward. I finally found it. She pulled a fresh manuscript from her coat. You once said music doesn't ask for permission. It asks if you're willing to be honest. Eli nodded. I remember. She unfolded the sheet. I want to play this at the Winter Gala. And I want you to play it with me. Eli stared at her, stunned. They'll never allow it. Let them try to stop me. He looked down at the keys. Then back at her. All right, he said quietly. But we don't play to impress. We play to remember. She reached across the piano and touched the cracked ivory. Then let's remember everything. The Winter Gala at the Albrecht Conservatory was no ordinary event. It was an annual showcase of the elite, an invitation-only spectacle where donors, trustees, and talent scouts gathered in silk and shadow to pass judgment behind champagne glasses and curated smiles. Every note played on stage had been rehearsed to within an inch of its soul, leaving no room for error, and certainly no space for rebellion. Tradition dictated that the closing performance would be reserved for the institution's shining legacy, a student groomed from childhood, usually bearing a last name etched in the walls of the donors' hall. Not this year. This year, the slot had been awarded to Lena Thomas. The board approved her selection under mounting pressure. After Lena's workshop performance went viral among students, and even a few faculty, alumni began asking questions. Some praised the risk. Some called it dangerous. The chairman, cautious but intrigued, pushed it through. Langston, however, was furious. In his office, he slammed a folder onto his desk, the title of the duet burning his eyes, Inheritance, composed by Lena Thomas and Elijah Rowe. He's not faculty, Langston growled to the chairman. He's not even certified. He's a janitor, the dean murmured. He's Elijah Rowe, the chairman corrected. There was silence. Even Langston couldn't argue that. He's returning to the stage, the chairman continued, and he's doing it here. Like it or not, this institution will be remembered for this moment. The days leading up to the gala blurred into late-night rehearsals and hushed conversations. Lena and Eli met in the basement each evening, the old upright piano no longer dusty but gleaming from care. Lena revised the composition nightly, building it not just for beauty, but for truth. One rehearsal, she faltered in the second section, her right hand unsure, the rhythm uncertain. "Stop trying to make it sound perfect," Eli said, adjusting his bench. "Let it wobble. Let it ache." "I'm scared it won't be enough," she admitted. Eli looked at her. "Perfection is forgettable. Honesty never is." He tapped the keys, played a few bars, then handed it back to her. "Now. Tell the story." She closed her eyes, exhaled slowly, and played. Not like a student. Like someone writing a letter to the world. The night of the gala arrived like thunder after a long hush. Chandeliers sparkled in the main hall, coats were checked, flutes of expensive wine were passed out like party favors. Everywhere, people whispered about the janitor story, unsure what to believe. Backstage, Lena adjusted the sleeves of her deep blue gown. Her hands were ice. Her heart was a drum. Eli stood beside her in a simple black suit, no tie, no flourish. He looked like a man who had come not to reclaim a crown, but to bury it. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she said honestly. "But let's go anyway." The MC's voice echoed from the stage, "For our final performance this evening, a piece titled Inheritance, performed by Lena Thomas and Elijah Rowe." Gasps rippled. They walked on stage to stunned silence. Phones lowered. Conversations died. Langston sat in the front row, arms folded, face stone. Eli sat first. Then Lena. The first note fell like snow. Soft. Careful. Sincere. The audience didn't know what hit them. By the time the melody built, Lena's right hand weaving through Eli's foundation, the room was utterly still. The composition didn't dazzle. It confided. Each phrase felt like a memory rediscovered. At one point, their hands crossed, not just physically but musically. She led, he supported, then they reversed. This wasn't about virtuosity. It was about connection. By the final chord, Lena let her hand hover. Then, slowly, she released it. Silence. Not stunned. Reverent. Then the applause erupted, not a polite crescendo, but a roar. Real, raw, and rising. Some stood immediately. Others wept. Even some of the more stoic donors found themselves dabbing at the corners of their eyes. But Langston, he stood not to clap. To leave. Only the chairman blocked his exit. "Stay," the chairman said softly. "Learn something." The MC returned to the mic, voice slightly choked with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "tonight, you did not witness rebellion. You witnessed revival. And with great honor, I announce, Elijah Rowe will be joining us not as a janitor, but as a permanent mentor of the Listening Lab initiative, beginning immediately." The crowd rose again. This time, not just for Lena. For both of them. Backstage, Lena collapsed into Eli's arms, laughing and sobbing at once. "I can't feel my face," she said. "That's because it's full of truth," he replied. She pulled back slightly. "You think they finally heard it?" "They did," he said. "But more importantly, you did." Outside, snow had started to fall again. Photographers flashed their bulbs. Reporters shouted questions. But Lena and Eli slipped out the back door, unnoticed, into the hush of the city night. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The music had already said everything. The morning after the winter gala, the entire Albrecht Conservatory felt different. As though the building itself had exhaled after years of holding its breath. The marble corridors were no longer just polished, they seemed warmer somehow. Students smiled more. Professors paused longer before giving corrections. Something unspoken had shifted. Lena walked into the atrium to a standing ovation from her peers. Not for show. Not because they had to. But because she had done something they all dreamed of but feared, she told the truth and survived it. Yet not everyone was clapping. Langston sat behind his office desk, fists clenched beneath polished wood, eyes red from lack of sleep. He humiliated me, he whispered to no one. In front of the board. In front of the world. Dr. Fenwick entered quietly, holding a copy of the gala program. He lifted the institution, he said. You were just too busy protecting your name to hear the sound of it. Langston's jaw flexed. The sound of what? The room breathing again. Langston stood. If they want to dismantle the standards, I won't be here to watch it fall. But Fenwick didn't argue. Because the students had already chosen. They were crowding the basement nightly now, not for credits, but for courage. The listening lab was no longer a secret. It was a movement. And at the heart of it, Elijah Rowe and Lena Thomas stood, not as legend and prodigy, but as mirror and light. That evening, Lena found Eli already seated at the upright. He was staring at a single note in the middle of the staff, unmoving. You all right? She asked. He looked up, faintly smiling. It's strange. After all these years. I thought once I finished Inheritance, I'd be done. But the music keeps talking. She sat beside him. Then maybe we're not finished yet. He glanced sideways. Lena nodded. There's something missing. Not in the notes. In the silence after. Eli looked down. The piece I never finished. The one after Camille left. It was supposed to be a requiem. But it turned into a silence I couldn't escape. Lena reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. This came for you. From the National Library of the Arts. They archived the showcase performance. Eli opened the envelope. His hands trembled, not from age, but from the weight of being remembered again. You're not invisible anymore, Lena said softly. But maybe I was never supposed to be remembered for who I was, he replied. Only for what I helped others become. She pulled a new manuscript from her satchel and laid it on the stand. What's this? The next piece, she said. It starts with the key you used to fear. He stared at the page, then chuckled. It's in D minor. You always said it was the most honest key, she smiled. And together, they began to write again. The weeks that followed were quiet but powerful. Lena declined 3 offers to transfer to conservatories in New York and Vienna. I'm not done learning here, she told them. Besides, my real professor's not leaving. The listening lab became the heartbeat of the school. Not a class. Not a club. A place. A room. Where students of every skill level came not to polish, but to unpeel. There were no rubrics. No recitals. Just truth. One evening, a janitor's cart rolled into the listening lab. A girl from the cleaning crew, maybe 16, stood nervously at the door. I heard you let people sit here, even if they don't play, she stammered. Eli turned in his chair. Not everyone starts with notes. Some start with silence. She nodded and sat on the floor in the corner, listening with wide eyes as a blind boy played a piece he composed by memory alone. When it ended, the girl clapped softly. That sounded like my mom, she whispered. Everyone turned. Like the way she hums when she doesn't know anyone's watching. Eli met Lena's eyes. The music was working. That weekend, Lena invited Eli to her apartment for dinner. Nothing fancy, just curry from her mom's recipe and an old record player spinning jazz in the corner. It was the first time she'd seen him out of the conservatory. You live like someone who doesn't want to be found, she teased. Eli chuckled, pouring tea. I lived like someone who forgot who he was. But you remember now? He nodded. Most days. She held up a copy of Inheritance, the official, published version. You know they want to name a wing after you. I said no, he replied. Why? He looked at her with that calm, thundercloud gaze. Because if they build walls around the music again, we'll lose the room we found. She placed the score gently on the table. Then maybe we build a different kind of room. Eli looked down. Then up. What did you have in mind? And Lena smiled, the kind of smile that knows a legacy has just begun. Spring arrived slowly at the Albrecht Conservatory, its first signs not in the blossoming trees or thawing fountains, but in the shift of sound that passed through its corridors. Laughter echoed again, real, uncurated. And music poured not just from rehearsal halls, but from stairwells, supply closets, even window ledges where students played to the open sky. The listening lab had become more than a basement room. It was now sacred ground. One evening, as Lena lit the tall, white candles that lined the back wall, tradition now, she noticed a small folded envelope on the piano bench. It was old, brittle with time, and sealed with wax. Her name was written in careful ink. She opened it. Inside was a letter in Eli's handwriting, dated 30 years ago. Lena. If you're reading this, then somehow, across time I found you, or you found me. I never finished the piece. I buried it in notebooks and silence. But in you, I've heard it again. I didn't know what I was listening for until your fingers made it real. Finish the part one couldn't. Eli. Tears welled. Not out of grief, but awe. Because somehow, even then, he had written with hope. As if he knew one day someone would arrive who wasn't just a student, but a key. That night, she composed 4 new bars and titled the expanded piece, The Room She Left Behind. It was no longer just a song. It was a story. And it wasn't finished yet. The final piece of the story came from a place Lena never expected. Her grandmother. She arrived at the conservatory unannounced, stepping carefully into the atrium with a small, battered folder tucked under her arm. I heard there's a room down here where no one gets laughed at for remembering, she said softly. Lena blinked. You used to write music. I used to hear it, her grandmother replied. Until life got too loud. Eli welcomed her personally. No pressure, he said gently. Just sit. Play what you remember. The old woman's fingers hovered over the keys, trembling from arthritis and time. Then, she played. It was slow. Hesitant. But every note shimmered with memory. By the time she finished, students were crying. One whispered, "It sounds like the part of a lullaby that's forgotten after the first verse." Eli smiled. Exactly. Her grandmother looked at Lena. I thought that part of me was gone. It wasn't, Lena said, gripping her hand. It was just waiting. Outside the conservatory, however, the world was getting louder again. Clips from the Winter Gala had gone viral. Media requests flooded in. Interviews. Guest appearances. Invitations to elite galas and showcases. One producer wanted to make a documentary. Billionaire Janitor finds prodigy. Lena slammed the folder shut. They're trying to make us a headline. They're trying to sell what they didn't build, Eli agreed. Then let's remind them, she said. This was never about the spotlight. And so, they turned down every major offer. Instead, they launched something else. The Listening Initiative. It wasn't just for conservatory students. It was for everyone. Teenagers with hand-me-down violins. Veterans with songs they'd written in notebooks in bunkers. Single moms who used music to fall asleep on buses. Each one paired with a mentor. Not to be taught, but to be heard. The first participant was a girl named Mariah. 14. Homeless. Never touched a grand piano before. She stepped into the listening lab barefoot, cheeks streaked with dried tears, holding a crumpled composition written in pencil on the back of a pizza box. Eli read it. He didn't correct it. He clapped. "That's your voice," he said. "Don't ever let the world rewrite it." Mariah played her first showcase in a thrift store dress. By the time she finished, the donors in the back row were on their feet. Lena sat beside her, whispering, "Welcome home." One rainy afternoon, while cataloging old archives, Lena stumbled upon a box labeled Rowe, unreleased. Inside were reel-to-reel tapes. She selected one. It was Camille's voice. "Elijah," she said on the tape, her tone full of quiet mischief, "one day you're going to disappear to remember yourself. When you come back, I hope you hear this and forgive the silence." A cello solo followed, aching, slow, like grief learning how to walk again. When the tape ended, Lena didn't speak. She found Eli that evening in the lab, tuning the old upright. She placed the tape in his hands. He listened to every second. Then lowered his head. And wept. Not from sorrow. From grace. "You ready to finish it?" Lena asked. He looked up. "Only if you play the first note." They opened a blank page. Wrote the title, "The Room She Left Behind." And began again, not with confidence, but with presence. The spring air outside the Albrecht Conservatory had shifted, from cold silence to something sweeter, like the soft hum before a song begins. The building, once rigid with structure and legacy, now breathed with a different rhythm. A new voice. Or rather, many. On the final day of the semester, Lena stood in front of her graduating class, cap tilted slightly to the side, fingers clutching a folded speech she had written and rewritten a dozen times. Cameras flashed, proud parents leaned forward, and faculty, some beaming, others still adjusting, waited to hear what the girl from the south side of Chicago would say. But Lena didn't read from the page. She folded it, tucked it into her gown pocket, and looked out into the packed auditorium. "I came here thinking I had to earn my place," she began. "That I had to play perfectly, speak carefully, fit quietly. But someone taught me that music, real music, isn't about being perfect. It's about being present." She paused. "I was told once that the world doesn't always listen to girls like me. And that was true. Until I met someone who listened before I even spoke." Her eyes found Eli, seated in the front row, wearing his old janitor's coat over a pressed shirt. One hand rested gently on a blank sheet of music folded in his lap. "I want to dedicate this day," she continued, "to the people the world overlooks. The ones cleaning the floor while the rest of us chase applause. The ones who remember what it means to feel before trying to impress. The ones who carry entire symphonies in silence." She raised the printed copy of The Room She Left Behind. "This isn't just a piece of music. It's a map. And if you ever lose your way, I hope it brings you home." The crowd stood before she even left the stage. No fanfare. Just truth. Later that evening, the listening lab glowed with candlelight. The old upright had been gently revarnished, the cracked key left as it was, untouched, a reminder that beauty didn't require repair. Lena found Eli already there, stacking journals on the shelf. "You're not leaving yet, are you?" she asked. "Not until the echoes stop," he replied. She handed him a gift, a small, black leather notebook. "What's this?" "Your next piece." He opened it. On the first page. "To the man who taught me how to play with my whole heart. Now it's your turn to write what comes next." He swallowed hard. And smiled. "What will you do now?" he asked. Lena looked around the room, the mural of outstretched hands, the bench, the teacups drying on the side table, the faint scent of candle wax and dust. "I think I'll stay a little while longer," she said. "There's more to listen to." Months passed. Then years. The listening lab became the heart of the conservatory. There were no auditions. No competition. Just an invitation, come as you are. Stay until you're heard. One afternoon, a young girl named Miriam entered the lab 12 years old, too shy to speak above a whisper, holding a drawing instead of sheet music. It was a picture of her father, drawn in crayon, with a broken piano beside him. "My dad used to play," she said, barely audible. "He died. I think he left something unfinished." Lena sat beside her. "Then let's try to finish it together." Eli continued to wear the janitor's coat, not out of necessity, but as a reminder. Of humility. Of the ground he came from. Of the silence that had saved him. Sometimes people didn't recognize him. Other times they whispered, "That's him. That's the one who disappeared." But what mattered most was what they said after. He listened. One day, Lena returned from a trip to find the piano covered in rose petals. A folded letter sat on the bench. It was from Eli. "Lena. If you're reading this, I've gone somewhere quieter. But not far. I'll still be listening. You gave me a final chorus. Now give the world your first verse. Love always. E." She didn't cry, not right away. She sat. Opened the notebook he left behind. And began to play something entirely new. Not inheritance. Not the room she left behind. Something only she could write. And that's how the story ends, or begins again. With a man who walked away from fame to remember who he was. With a girl who refused to let silence define her. With a room full of broken notes, unfinished pages, and people waiting to be heard. Because in the end, music, like truth, isn't about how loud you play. It's about who hears you when you whisper. Sometimes the people the world overlooks are carrying the most beautiful songs inside them. Rowe didn't return for fame. He returned for the sound he'd lost in the noise of applause. And Lena? She reminded us that honesty doesn't come with permission, it comes with courage. If this story moved you, subscribe to True Echo for more powerful, real-feeling stories like this one. Leave a comment below, what would you name your composition? And share this video with someone who needs to hear that their voice still matters.